This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. I'm probably the world's worst public speaker. I'll just throw that out at the very beginning so we all know. But I've done a lot of year-end closing at school districts, which is where I came from before I came to work here. So I'll just run through some things that I used to do when I was out at the district, and hopefully it'll be helpful to make your year-end closing process a little easier. If you look at some of these items now, it helps to cut down on the crunch time rush once you hit the year-end close date and suddenly everything is due all at one time. So we'll just go through some items that you'll want to review before we get to the June 30th cutoff. We'll be taking a look at your revenues, expenses, some reconciliations that you want to do, and some other just miscellaneous items that you'll want to take a look at before you get to that final date. So to start with, probably the most important thing is our money. We want to look at our tax revenues and see what we've gotten in so far this year and how that compares to the amount that we've budgeted. And of course, we're not going to get exactly what we had anticipated or budgeted. So there's always going to be somebody paying late or protesting. So if you're expecting money, check with your county treasurer. They should be sending you the amount that they are still expecting to come in. Make sure that your records match the county treasurer's records and that your protested taxes are recorded in the appropriate account. Any questions on these items on your taxes? Anybody? Okay. For your grants, I know some of your grants don't end until September, but some of them do need to be spent by June. So if you have grant money that needs to be spent by June, you want to make sure you take a look at those and just make sure that if you have money that you need to spend, you have plans to spend that so that you don't have money sitting out there that you might have to return. If you have money, you definitely want to use it if you can. If you have money that's left and you don't know what to do with it, take a look at your general fund expenses and see if there are any expenses that might have qualified for those grant funds, and you can journal those expenses over into the grant if they're eligible. And then also your indirect costs, if you have an approved indirect cost rate, then if the grant allows it, you can charge those as well and free up some money that way. Any questions? Nobody? I feel like I'm talking to myself. Okay, moving on. Okay, so with your grant revenue, you want to make sure in your grants that your expenses and revenues match in your budget. If you have any cash to request, go ahead and submit that before year end. If you have reports that you need to submit by year end, make sure that you have those ready to go. If you are planning on accruing or deferring any revenue, have a look at that. And if you're planning on carrying over any money, make sure that you're within the allowable guidelines, that you don't have more money by percentage or total dollar amount than you're allowed. Okay. And then I know last year I had to send out a few letters on our lease rental fund. There were a few people that actually had too much money in here. I know too much money is usually not a bad thing, but in this case it is. Our our statutes don't allow us to have any more than $10,000 for elementary or $20,000 for K-12. And so if you have money in excess of those amounts, please take a look at these before June 30th. You still have time to come within the guidelines and spend these amounts down. The money in this account has to be spent to maintain or improve the buildings that you're collecting the money for. So if you're renting out your gymnasium, the building that that gymnasium is in is the building that you have to spend the money on. Anything that is left over that you can't spend the money on for maintenance or improvements has to be transferred to your general fund. So please make sure that if you have money in excess of these amounts, that you take care of these transfers so that we are not over these amounts at year end. Any questions on lease? Nobody. I'm still talking to myself, guys. Are you all asleep?
And in fairness, we do have you muted. Do type in the chat box if you have, well, somebody's here, but.
Well, everybody's here. They're just all really quiet. All right, I'll keep going. Well, in all fairness, too, I see names of people who can teach this class better than I could, so it's all good. Okay, so as you go through looking at your general ledger, as you get closer to year end, you want to see if you're going to be owing anybody money or if anybody owes you money at June 30th. If you have either of those situations, you may need to set up accruals, receivables, or payables. Also, are you going to be in a situation where you have prepaid any expenses? And if you have, is it going to be a significant amount where you need to set that up in your system? I know that there are usually things like conferences that you've paid for in June that may not be happening until July, August, September. If they're not a significant amount, it's up to you if you want to set that up as a prepaid. It seems like there's always something that comes up in June that has to be paid that's for the next year. So just use your best judgment. If you need to talk to your auditor, go ahead and make that call. But definitely be looking for things in June that you're paying for that may be for the next school year. And if it's any large dollar amount, you definitely want to be considering booking that as a prepaid and talking to your auditor about that expense. Okay, and then here is just an example from Mayfair's of your balance sheet and setting up the outflows, your liabilities, your inflows, and some definitions of each one. And if anybody has any questions on these, I think everybody has done pretty well with their TFS accounts, their reports, and I don't know if anyone has any questions on how to enter these in their TFS reports. Doesn't look like it. I don't see anybody typing. Okay, I'll go ahead and move on. So your expenses, as you are receiving invoices and purchasing items, the items that you receive on or before June 30th are the items that you need to pay for out of the current fiscal year. If you have items that you receive in July, you need to pay for those out of the next fiscal year. The one exception is that if you have a valid contract or purchase order in place committing your districts to expend money, then you can encumber that money out of the current fiscal year, even though the work may take place in the future. If you have exceptions, such as your prepaid items for conferences or what have you, you want to treat those consistently every year. Things like utilities, summer school payroll, usually there's some kind of exception, but use consistency when you're looking at things that may cross fiscal years. Try and use the same methods each year when you decide which year you're going to pay things out of. If it does cross fiscal years, just use the same method to decide which year you'll pay from. And so June 30th is the last day that you can obligate funds. If you are planning to encumber a contract, you must have it signed and in place by June 30th. And you must have the funds available and the budget authority available to cover that contract if you're planning to encumber money. And then we always recommend that if you are planning to set a purchasing deadline to try and cut off by June 30th, do it early enough so that you can get your invoices and all of your payments out by the deadline, so that you're not having to set up accruals and scramble to make all of your payments by June 30th. Anybody have any questions so far? Anybody at all? Comments? Okay. So payroll is where you can get into a little bit of gray area. So I'm going to say generally, emphasis on generally, your payments should be made in the same fiscal year that the hours were worked. And I say generally because I know that summer school in some cases will all be paid in one fiscal year or the other, regardless of when the hours actually occurred. There may be other exceptions for stipends and things like that. Again, consistency is important, and as long as you are consistent with the way you are making your payments, you're fine. If you have any concerns about whether you're doing it appropriately, call your auditors and talk to them. Ask them what their opinion is on it, because they are ultimately the ones that are going to direct whether you have audit findings or not. So yes, generally, if you have year-round employees that are working, you may have some dates that cross payrolls at the end of the year. You know, do the best you can, talk to your auditors, and, you know, we're not here to tell you you absolutely must do it this way, but work with your auditors and be consistent. You definitely want to have your quarterly taxes issued by June 30th and all of your retirement payments done and out. And then your payroll clearing account should zero out by the year end. So any balance that you have minus items that have not cleared should zero out. Anybody have any comments about payroll? Is there anything you're doing out at your school sites that you could give us some suggestions about?
You are unmuted, so feel free to talk. Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
Okay. So just a reminder about reconciliations and most of these things should be done monthly, but definitely at year end, if you're behind at all, you want to get caught up on reconciling your cash to the county treasurer. You want to reconcile your student activity accounts, your payroll clearing account, any other separate bank accounts, general ledger, clearing or trust accounts. Make sure you have your trial balances and all of your prior year-end journals or accruals have been cleared. Okay. So yeah, I know things get kind of wild during the school year, and it's totally understandable to be behind at one point or another, but this time of year, you definitely want to have these items caught up. And then, I don't know if anyone is aware out there, but you can be working on entering your tow records for your new employees for this year. That system is open and available. You don't have to wait until the compensation expenditure report is due to enter those records. Might make it a little bit easier to get your reports in and have that process go smoothly if you enter those now or whenever you have time to do that. And as you review your general ledgers, if you find that you need to enter any journals to correct invalid entries, this would be a good time to do that as well. If you have the opportunity to go through your general ledgers and take a look at any of your object codes in the 7 series, you would want to add those new fixed assets to your asset list. And then if you've sold or disposed of any of your fixed assets during the year, those items would need to be zeroed out or removed from your list so that you have an accurate list to work with when you're going into your TFS reporting. Depreciation, I just threw this on here mainly just for information, and I know not everyone puts their fixed assets and depreciation on their TFS, but this information is here if you want it. If you want any more information on how to set up depreciation, you're always welcome to call us. Of these different methods, it would be highly unlikely that we would ever use the units of production depreciation method in school systems, but the other 3 could be used depending on what items you're purchasing. So if you have questions or you ever need help setting these up, you're welcome to call us, or your auditors can help you. Entirely up to you if you want to do this with OPI or if you just set this up within your own software. Okay. And then just a general budget check before we get to the end of the year, comparing your budgets to your actuals and all of your budgeted funds. Make sure you haven't spent more money than you've planned, and checking on your local revenue, your interest. If you need to do a budget amendment because you are over somewhere, June 30th is the last day that OPI can process those. So, and we need to have that in our hands by June 30th. So please don't wait until 4:55 on June 30th because that's not going to give us time to process it. I need to have at least a little bit of time on that day, considering that I could get a number of them. So, just please give us a little bit of time to process them as well. And we'll try and get you guys taken care of as well. For your special ed, just double check your expenses and make sure that you have enough to meet your maintenance of effort requirements. This is another case where you could be checking your general ledger expenses to see if you have anything that may be eligible to be journaled over. It would have to be a valid special ed expense that would be journaled there to try and avoid having to give money back in this case. Definitely don't want to give money back if we don't have to.
And as a note, I think most people are pretty experienced on the phone, but you do know that when you enter in your 280 expenditures into Mayfair's in your TFS report, it will spit out what if you are in the category that you would have to do a payback or a reversion, or you didn't meet your maintenance effort. That is shown in Mayfair. So if you are unsure of that and don't know how that works, you can let me know. You can let Carrie know, or Kathleen when or know, and we can certainly help you figure that out.
Anybody have anything to add at this point? Any comments or suggestions? I hear somebody moving. That's a good thing. All right, we'll go ahead and move on. Just a little note about transportation. Because we had the cuts to the block grant, we have the guidelines for the transportation transfer provisions here. These are also found on the OPI website. So if you have any questions about how to take care of this transportation transfer, if you need to do it, you're welcome to call us. Also, you need to have all of your new transportation contracts into Donnell Rosenthal by July 1st. So that comes right on top of everything else. Just don't forget, because we don't want to have kids hitchhiking to school. It's a long walk for some of them.
And to remind people, and I probably am beating a dead horse sometimes, the transportation transfer provision to make up the effects of the reduction and loss of the block grant have to continue through fiscal year 2021. This year in June, you will also see the payment reduction close to the same amount as last year, depending on, statewide what those look like, but you are still required to make up those two reductions by transferring funds, or you have to be able to demonstrate that your mills will not increase because you didn't do the transfer. So one of those two, and I know we had that last year, so if there's any questions or concerns about that, let me know.
And then just a couple of notes about tuition. The District of Residence pays the remaining tuition and transportation obligations by June 15th, so you may need to either send or be receiving invoices for these. And please do get them out in time for the other districts to process and get the checks back to you. And then we just had a couple of notes about some of the common calls we had about TFS reports. A lot of calls about the balance sheet not matching the revenue and expenditures on line 52. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Karen.
I will talk about that. That seems to be the most common, where it's like line 5 on this report doesn't match line 52 on the balance sheet report, or vice versa. And the thing I would caution people is that it seems that there are some items that are entered on the balance sheet that just are residual from year to year. Like the previous clerk had maybe entered on for the last 5 years, and the new clerk just continued that process. But I'd really stress people to know everything that they're entering on their balance sheet, to know that it has a purpose for being there. Because if it's just something that's rolled over year to year, there are ways that you can either write that off or fix it. But you want your balance sheet to really match your system and not just get to the end number by putting in certain values or rolling things over. And we can help you with that if you get to that point. And in order to see what this error is, you really have to go into the report section of Mayfair's and print off your trustees report in full to see where those two lines are. And then you can see one of them takes last year's balance, adds, revenues, subtracts expenditures, and then compares it with your balance sheet. And if those two don't match, that's where you're getting the error. So it does have to do with the balance of last year and the information you put in this year. And you won't be able to submit if you have this error because they have to match. So, if you do need help, let me know. And then I will add there is a new step to verify that facilities conditions inventory report's been completed. That report is the updated report. I'll keep stressing that you have to update your facilities conditions inventory report even if you did not permissively levy in the building reserve fund, and you're required to do that by July 31st of this year. So we'll collect that on the trustees report. But we will go through more. There's a few more Mayfair's changes that are coming up, and we will have another session that we will talk about that more specifically. But that is a good note to keep in mind. While you still have time to get that report updated, you will want to do that.
The one thing you don't have to do is spend a lot of money to update the report. We've had some calls that districts are bringing in consultants for thousands of dollars, and that is not necessary unless you choose to do it that way, which is fine if you want to, but you don't have to bring in a consultant. You don't have to do anything incredibly fancy or over the top. You just have to update the report. You're not submitting it to anybody. We're not going to ask you for it. We're just asking if you updated it. So you want to have some form of a report that you can use to work from as you complete your building maintenance and updates. And as far as what form that is, we don't care. Nobody cares as long as you have a report of some kind and you're working from it. Does anybody have any questions about that? Or any questions at all? That's my final slide, and we're about 25 minutes early.
And I'm gonna pick on a few of you.
I think we should pick on Cindy Foley, since she's one of the ones that I'm sure could teach this better than me. Do you have anything to add, Cindy?
Don't pick on me.
Your name's kind of at the top of the list, Cindy. If you could give anybody some quick advice for year-end stuff, what would it be?
Oh boy, any advice I could give is to go with your, take all of this information that you can get, and I'm thinking of new clerks in general here, as well as us veterans. It's not bad to hear this again for the umpteenth time, but I think that it's a good thing to take all of this information, get all your names, as well as garnering that everything you can from your clerks that you use as mentors, as well as the MASBO organization, because I think all of us can help each other out and know where to go and ask questions of people. And so I think that's very important.
All right. Thank you, Cindy. Anybody else have any comments or suggestions?
Dennis, I'm sure you have some suggestions.
No, not right now. My thoughts don't come until I get into it. So I recommend start getting into it now. Don't wait till the last minute.
Yeah, good point.
Okay. Well, I think we've checked and double checked with a couple of our veterans out there, so it doesn't seem like we've overlooked anything glaring and huge. We're always here. If anyone has questions, you're welcome to call us anytime. And like Cindy said, we have MASBO, we have each other to call and ask questions of. So let's just network as we need to and be available for each other, and we can work through it and help each other out.
And we will post this presentation in the PowerPoint form and what we've recorded as far as the webinar. So you can go back and listen, or you can just read through the PowerPoint. Those will be available on the website under the About School Finance section of the School Finance page.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and hope the rest of your week is outstanding, and we will talk to you again next month.
Thanks, everyone.